The DayZ 1.13 update just dropped onto the experimental branch of DayZ. This means if you're an Xbox or PC player, you can hop onto the experimental builds of the game to test the update early. If not, you'll have to wait a few more weeks for the update to undergo some testing before it's pushed to the stable version of the game. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at all the new stuff added this update, which includes an M16A2 rifle, burst fire mode, a 6x ATOG scope, a 45 round KA-74 mag, a 60 round standardized mag, unclean rags can cause infection, a disinfected state, fever symptoms, iodine tincture, 2 new machetes, some changes to infected, and some new special types of infected, as well as a lot of changes and bug fixes. The most notable feature of this update is the new M16A2 rifle. We've all been waiting for a new assault rifle for a while now, so I'll waste no time covering all its features. It's similar to the M4 in appearance and functionality, shooting the same 5.56 by 45 round and taking the same magazines. This includes the 10 round CMAG, the 20 round CMAG, the 30 round CMAG, the 40 round CMAG, and the 30 round STANAG and the 60 round coupled STANAG. What's important to note about the M16 is that it cannot fire in automatic mode and in fact uses the new burst mode, shooting 3 bullets at quick intervals. Although you can select to fire it in single fire, which will probably be my preferred method when using this weapon. Another limitation of the M16 is that you cannot swap out the iron sights, which greatly reduces the effective range of the weapon. Having said all this, you can still attach an M4 suppressor or bottle suppressor to the weapon. These are the following sounds and animations. It's safe to say the M16A2 is not going to be the greatest weapon, but it fits that needed gap in mid-tier DayZ weapons perfectly. You now have another option instead of always having to run an SKS early game. I guess it's a poor man's M4. I was actually pleasantly surprised on how the burst mode works. It's actually quite usable. You can now even put an MP5 into burst mode. We then have the brand new ATOG 6x scope. This can be used on the M4 but works even better with the Pioneer rifle added last patch. Next, we have the introduction of a 45 round KA-74 mag, which is going to be nothing more than lethal. There's never been much appeal for the 74 over a 101 or AKM, so this is really going to make it a more viable option. It can even fit in a baby AK, which in my eyes is very OP. I'm going to be rocking this little killer machine non-stop. We also have fever symptoms added to the flu. The disease which previously just made you sneeze. This is going to be rather dangerous now, so remember to keep social distancing from anyone sneezing. In addition, masks and gas masks have added resistance against catching this disease from other players, although do remember you can still catch it if you get too cold. To best avoid this disease, keep warm, wear a mask and take multivitamins when experiencing cold weather or when in the vicinity of somebody who is infected. We then have the 2 new machetes, the crude machete and the oriental machete. There's nothing too special about them, but you can't go wrong with a couple more choices and variation in the melee weapons you find across the land. My last myth busting video has now immediately been made outdated with our next feature. Zombies will now be attracted by smoke grenades, flare gun flares and fireplaces during night time. On the topic of zombies, we now have new special infected types. These are going to be different to the existing zombies. So we have a heavy soldier, military officer, runner and heavy police. So let's take a quick look at them. We can expect changes to all infected, with all infected attacks now possible to block and the melee speed of infected reduced by 25%. The health of infected has been changed depending on the tier and category of infected, with low tier civilians infected having their health lowered by 15%, runners lowered by 50% and soldiers increased by 15%. This should create some diversity between infected when exploring Chernarus. In addition, infected have different attack damage and bleed chances, with low tier and runner infected dealing the lowest damage and lowest bleed chance, regular civilians dealing a medium damage and a medium bleed chance, and firefighter, police and soldiers dealing the highest damage with the highest bleed chance. Infected are going to be a lot harder, especially in better locations, although the melee armor for the infected head has been reduced by 40%, so it's crucial you go for those headshots. A new survival feature this patch regarding infected wounds has been added. It is important to disinfect rags before use on a wound. This can be done with disinfectant, alcohol or the new iodine. Once this is done, the disinfected state will be highlighted on the item and it is safe for use. There's a lot of changes this patch, and I'll leave a link to the changelog in the description if you want to read through them all, but right now I'm going to highlight what I think are the most impactful and important changes this patch. The first being the adjusted player zones. With shoulders and top parts of the leg now part of the torso, this means hitting a player in the shoulder will now count as a torso, which should mean it can be protected by vests. Damage has also been reduced to arms when taking hits, meaning shots to the arms will now do less damage, as well as shock damage reduced to hitting players in the leg, which should increase the amount of leg shots needed to knock a player out unconscious. Having said all this, arms are no longer protected by vests. This helps explain the previous buff to arms with the reduction of arm damage. This should change PvP slightly and maybe make it just a little bit harder to kill players this patch. The next change adds a couple more uses to tools. A screwdriver can now be used to cut bark and pliers can now open cans. Matches will no longer light fires when they aren't dry. This gives the waterproof container a lot more purpose. Keep those matches dry if you plan on making a fire. Another big change is that armoured vests will now require more inventory space. This should help reduce the amount of spare vests people carry around. It was very common to carry multiple vests and swap on a new one after the first one is damaged. Another interesting change to PvP comes in the form of the unconscious time, which is now directly dependent on the calibre the player got hit by. So for example, you can expect to go uncon for a lot longer by being hit by a shotgun slug than a .22 round. Finally, saws now last longer when cutting planks. I always felt they ruined far too quickly. It will now take less shots to ruin a suppressor. This is all dependent on the type of suppressor and the calibre shot through it. So, for example, a normalised suppressor will last longer on a baby AK than an SVD. So, that's pretty much everything for today's video. And as I said earlier, I'll leave the patch notes down below if you want to give it a read yourself. I also recommend hopping on the experimental servers if you can and returning your feedback to the developers. If you did enjoy the video or found it helpful, a like and a sub is much appreciated, and let me know what you thought about the update in the comments below. This has been Rav.